The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've talked about the Canadian province of Alberta as sort of the conservative hub of Canada, and one of our viewers from Alberta actually described it as the Alabama of Canada. I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but they actually did a good thing recently to make schools more comfortable for transgender students. The Ministry of Education made the following suggestions to schools. Let's take a look at those, Lewis, and see what was on that list. Number one, allow students to self-identify with particular gender or sexual orientation and choose their preferred name and pronoun. Modernize school uniforms to allow for gender-neutral options. Steer away from girls versus boys setups for activities. Allow students to participate in sports that reflect their gender identity. Create gender-neutral spaces in bathrooms and changing rooms, and let students use the bathroom or changing room that is in line with their gender identity. So now the school boards have to draft policies that will reflect these values by the end of March. Conservatives are flipping out. And no surprise, Lewis, the big issue is the bathrooms. I know that our audience still isn't completely on board with me on this, but I think we should have gender-neutral bathrooms. And in New York City, this is becoming more and more popular. I've seen
now,
it.
Hold on. Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
Should we have specific bathrooms that are gender neutral, or should bathrooms just be gender neutral?
We should have all bathrooms be gender neutral. And the best setup in my mind, and you can do this with locker rooms, you can do this however you want to do it. You walk in, if you live in New York City, go to the Standard, the beer garden at the Standard Hotel on the West Side. You walk into the bathrooms and you walk in and there's just a bunch of sinks there. And then you go beyond that, and there's just a bunch of stalls, and it's all stalls. There's no urinals. Everybody has a private stall. I believe the doors are floor to ceiling, Lewis, which is a thing sometimes people from Europe come to the U.S. and they're like, why do the doors not reach all the way up and down? You've got, I believe, if I recall correctly, doors ceiling to floor. And then you come out and you wash your hands next to people that may not be of the same sex as you. And that's it, and it's not really a big deal. Now, people will say, David, you have the privileged position of not knowing what it's like to be a woman and feel danger or less than safe when there are men in something like a locker room or a changing room or a bathroom.
Well, there's only one way to alleviate that irrational fear, and that is by being in a bathroom with someone of the opposite sex.
I wouldn't call it irrational. I mean, there is no question whatsoever that men generally are larger than women. When you put men and women together.
But it is irrational to just be afraid because there's a man in the same bathroom as you.
It's irrational to be afraid just to be around another man.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not irrational to recognize that most sexual assaults are man on woman. And when you introduce a scenario in which people may be exposed physically based on removing clothes or whatever, I don't call that irrational whatsoever. I just believe that the path forward with the transgender thing is going to be not the idea of, okay, we'll have men's and women's bathrooms, but then you can come in to the men's room if you identify as a man, even if you're physically a woman. I don't even know that that's the path forward. I think it's just moving in the direction of, you've got the common sink area, and then you've got stalls or changing rooms or whatever that are private, and it just doesn't matter what genitals you have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, am I going to push? I sound really passionate about this, but am I going to be pushing for, gender neutral restrooms? I mean, I don't really have a horse in this race, because I just, I don't care who's in the bathroom with me. I don't care if people don't want to be in the same bathroom as me.
Right.
But that being said, I have no problem with this.
Yeah, and I know people will email me and they'll say I'm being insensitive. I'm not being insensitive. In other words, I completely sympathize with and respect to the extent that I am able to, as a man who has not experienced what women email me and say they experience in terms of fear when it comes to these situations. I am being as empathetic and sympathetic to that as I am able to be. But I believe that the path forward is what is common already in many college campuses, Connecticut College, for example. I know many people who went there said their bathrooms are all co-ed now. You've got the sink area, and then you've got individual showers on one side and individual stalls on the other side. And that's sort of it. You just go in, and that's the thing. They haven't had any problems with it whatsoever. I believe that is the path forward. And I don't disagree that we probably need some focus for many people on what is appropriate behavior in those bathrooms. And I think that that's absolutely fine and a reasonable place to focus. But I think that a lot of this chaos could be alleviated if we were just more used to the idea that we have these types of bathrooms that I described.
Well, I mean, maybe it has to be a slow process. Maybe you start with having a room you walk into, and there are the sinks, and then from the sinks, you have two separate doors that men and women can go into.
And I've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess baby steps.
Okay, big announcement, Lewis. Tuesday, January 26th, we are having a David Pakman Show town hall meeting. The way these work is you and I connect via video conference on the Spreecast platform, and then we answer questions from the audience. In the past, the town hall questions have been about the future of the show, political questions, entertainment questions, sports questions, personal questions. Lewis seems to be just a fascinating character to much of the audience, and many questions about Lewis and what he's up to off the air always come up. How do you get access? How do you get invited to this town hall? It's very easy. All David Pakman Show members will be invited to the David Pakman Show town hall, which will be Tuesday, January 26th at 8 p.m. Now, if you want to sign up, you sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. That I recommend. So many other great benefits. The whole thing. You vote with your dollars. You support independent media. You get the bonus show, the archive of shows, the commercial-free audio and video streams, all that stuff. If that doesn't work for you, we do always post these town halls about a week later to YouTube, and people are absolutely free to check that out, and that's for absolutely everybody. But the participation, we need to have some way to sort of limit it. Otherwise, we only have a little over an hour. We want to get to as many questions as we can. We do have to limit it somehow, and we limit it to David Pakman Show members. I'm looking forward to this next one because it's the first one in an election year. The membership program is bigger than ever, so I anticipate people going completely crazy at this thing, eager to ask you questions.
Yeah, I always enjoy it. It's just something different, and I actually like fielding personal questions.
You do?
Yeah, because for once, we're not talking about politics, right?
Do you recall a question you've been asked in a town hall that was particularly interesting for you to answer?
Didn't someone ask me about what metal bands I like?
Maybe.
I think there was one of those questions. I could talk about that all day.
Absolutely.
I love
I've seen you do it.
Or video games or whatever.
We got some interesting questions on the last one, which was shortly after having moved to Boston, or shortly before, I believe. I believe Lewis was in Boston, but I wasn't yet. Maybe I don't exactly remember now. In any case, the question was, compare for me being in Boston versus being in New York City, and for Lewis, compare being in Boston versus being in Austin, Texas. And there were a lot of interesting things. We also get suggestions for segments from the audience, all that very cool stuff. So the point I'm getting at is go to davidpakman.com/membership, sign up, and then you will get invited to the town hall on Tuesday evening. Now, we have a fantastic program for you today. We're going to answer audience questions. We're going to update some old stories. We have a great interview coming up. And then on today's bonus show, we will talk about North Korea inventing hangover-free alcoholic drinks. Maybe. We don't know. We're going to explore. They claim to have invented that. We will talk about price fixing at Auschwitz. We will talk about price fixing there, which is a very, very disturbing story. And we will also talk about a lawmaker who asked teens if they are virgins. What was the context? What could possibly have been going on, Lewis, to force a lawmaker to ask teens whether they are virgins? Fantastic program today. We are expecting absolutely no snow-related, blizzard-related interruptions of the program after this weekend. And I'm glad everybody's with us on the Friday show. The Friday show is great, Lewis. I love the Friday show.
Who doesn't love the Friday show? It happens every Friday.
And the big announcement about the Friday show is it is coming to Free Speech TV. Free Speech TV previously airing only our Monday through Thursday shows. Free Speech TV will begin airing the Friday show for people who are disappointed that they can watch Monday through Thursday on Free Speech TV, and then they've got to go online to find our show. For example, you will be able to get the Friday show on Free Speech TV starting very, very soon. I will update you with a date as soon as I have it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show is not funded by big media conglomerates and huge corporations, but rather by members of our audience through the membership program. And today's new member of the day is Heidi Williams. Heidi, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Heidi at davidpakman.com/membership. We also have a scheduled town hall meeting with our audience coming up. More about that on the bonus show. This week in show history, 7 years ago this week, huge optimism about President Obama. He has 1 year to go, meaning 7 years ago he was inaugurated. The question was, would he live up to it? It is hard to really do this question justice in just a few minutes. The good of President Obama's presidency, getting us mostly out of Iraq and Afghanistan, kind of to a certain extent, depending on how you define being out. Enough caveats, Lewis? I mean, he kind of got us out.
We have a smaller troop presence in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Record consecutive months of job growth, unemployment down to 5%, progress on alternative energy, but not really what I would like to see. The Affordable Care Act, which had lots of good with some that's not so good, which we've talked about. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The stimulus bill, which was good but not big enough. Elimination of Osama bin Laden. Auto industry turnaround. Certainly an improvement of U.S. image abroad, according to actual polls. But there's been some bad of President Obama as well, right? I mean, scaling up drone warfare. Pragmatically speaking, maybe there's some good to that in that we would be doing a lot of those operations anyway and maybe killing even more people. I don't know. That's a debate to be had. Scaling up and doubling down on NSA surveillance and Patriot Act style legislation. Not nearly enough Wall Street reform and holding Wall Street accountable for what they did to this economy. It's always important, Lewis, to contextualize within what is reasonably possible to do when we analyze what a president did. Yes, President Obama didn't single-handedly institute single-payer health care. Probably wouldn't be possible for a president to single-handedly do that. You'd really need the Senate and you would need the House. So all in all, optimism about President Obama from 7 years ago, much of it has faded, but there has been much good that has taken place during the President Obama 2 terms.
Sure. The best thing would be the recovery and the bailouts, which seem to have helped everybody and worked quite well. And yes, plenty of bad, but...
Now, you mean the car bailouts, I'm guessing, right? Not so much the bank ones?
Well, you could say both. I mean...
A little more dicey once you get into the bank ones. Was it really good for those banks to be too big to fail? Yes, there would have been huge negative impact if some of those banks fell apart. At the same time, are we really better off because big banks that are doing a lot of really negative things for the average person, is it great that they were allowed to keep running? I don't know.
Well,
I totally get what you're saying.
The banks fall apart. We suffer.
I get it.
Not the executives.
I get it.
Yeah.
It's far more complicated than just do the banks deserve to keep running or not? But yeah, a lot of questions there.
Yeah. So anyway, can we give it a letter grade? What do we do here? C plus?
The problem about the letter grades is relative to what, right? I mean, like, what would be an A? Is A exactly what we would love a president to do if we could just write down a list on a piece of paper? Or is an A the most that a president could realistically do with a House that is against them, right? I mean,
so let's just pretend it's like a timeline thing and we're moving forward. And so the grade is compared to the last president.
Oh, well, I mean, compared to the last president, I guess it's an A triple plus, right? I mean, the last president was such an abortive disaster.
Well, I don't know. He extended the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
He extended tax cuts. He extended a lot of that bad stuff.
Okay, I mean, I guess compared to Bush, we're talking about A minus, B plus here, and this I have a long laundry list about things that are really bad that President Obama has done, and I've only gotten into the tip of it. But compared to George W. Bush, there is no comparison essentially.
I suppose you're right. Yeah, considering the wars, yes, no comparison.
3 years ago this week, shootings plagued Gun Appreciation Day. I don't know if you remember this Gun Appreciation Day thing. It was really stupid. And the chairman of it was named Larry Ward. And we actually interviewed him. And we've had very few interviews on our program, Lewis, where the guest abruptly ends the interview, what we call a hang up. Larry Ward's interview was one of them. I invite you to check out that interview. And the entire Gun Appreciation Day thing was a disaster. There were gun shows in Indiana and in Ohio and in North Carolina with shootings, accidental shootings, as people like to call them. I call them negligent shootings. They just don't learn. And last week we talked about the Gabby Giffords shooting and how the United States, by and large, learned very little in terms of turning it into action from the Gabby Giffords shooting. The Gun Appreciation Day shootings showed us the absurdity of this ammo-sexual obsession with guns that we have. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't know that anything could happen with guns in this country, no matter how disastrous, that would make the more guns in more places crowd say, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to reconsider.
No, it really only happens on an individual basis. I think that, let's say one of those people is affected somehow by gun violence, despite having a gun on them,
right?
Despite having guns in the home, and they realize that it either made no difference or made the situation worse. Maybe on an individual basis, you'll have some people change their minds.
And we sometimes
the vast
get
majority
stories.
of this thing will never happen to any of them.
Right. It's interesting because every once in a while we'll get a story from someone who said, hey, I'm all about Second Amendment, concealed carry. I was at this shooting and I had a gun. And when the craziness started, I realized, what am I going to do if I take the gun out? How am I going to improve this situation if I take the gun out? That's a situation very few people will ever be in. But sometimes it happens and they realize, I'm not going to be able to add to the situation here by adding my gun to the flurry of gunshots.
Yeah, well, the problem is that every gun owner thinks they're Rambo or James Bond. So
not all. I mean, we get emails from some who say, I would never even think of getting involved. I carry my gun.
You know
with
the
me
type
anywhere.
of person I'm talking about. I mean, if you're someone who likes to collect guns and go target shooting, I mean, we're talking about the types of people we're seeing in the picture here.
Yeah.
They do all think they're Rambo or James Bond, and they think they'll be in a situation where they'll just dominate and they'll own it, and everything will be fine because they had a gun. And until they're in that situation, you won't change their mind.
2 years ago this week, we had data from San Francisco's minimum wage increase to $10.74 an hour. For years prior to getting this data from San Francisco, we heard from the right, it's going to destroy the San Francisco economy. It's going to destroy fast food. It'll be a disaster. And of course, it didn't hurt the economy in San Francisco whatsoever. We talked about how even within the fast food industry, hiring and employment and profits had not been hurt by the $10.74 an hour minimum wage that San Francisco instituted. And this has continued to be the case, Lewis. Now, the crazy thing is we had all the data, right? We had the numbers about hiring. We had the numbers about wages. We had the numbers about profits. We had all the numbers from San Francisco with their $10.74 minimum wage. And still, people remained unconvinced. Those who said we should have no minimum wage were not convinced. Those who said a higher minimum wage hurts the economy still were not convinced.
Nope. I don't even think you probably have people who live there and business owners who still were not convinced. But there are places in the country now that are going up to 15, going to be implemented over the course of several years.
Right.
It's going to take a long time to collect that data.
And remember,
unfortunately,
it's not really an increase, inflation adjusted. Inflation adjusted, we're talking about tiny changes here. People seem to forget that.
Yeah, I don't think they care, really.
No. Oh, they don't,
I mean, what does inflation even mean to them or to the business owner who thinks that he's going to go bankrupt if he starts paying his employees a few more dollars an hour?
And when we did the story 2 years ago, people emailed in, as they always do, when we talk about the minimum wage, saying, David, if you like raising the minimum wage to $10.74, why not raise it to $100 an hour and then everybody will make $100 an hour? You have to know how to diffuse that really dumb argument. That's an absolutist extreme argument that's not even relevant. There's no justification for making the minimum wage $100 an hour. There's no economic justification. There's no equilibrium anywhere in the economy that would suggest that $100 an hour is where we need to be for a living wage. People who respond with that either, number one, are trolling you or just very, very antagonistic, or number two, don't understand anything about economics. Because when we say, hey, the minimum wage is lower than it was in 1968, inflation adjusted, we've got to raise it, or $15 minimum wage within the next 3 years, we need to remember what the context is. What is cost of living? And what are the mean and median wages in the economy? There's no economic indicator that would say the minimum wage should be $100 per hour. It's a dumb argument. Know that you should not fall prey to that when supply-siders bring that up to you.
Most people also just don't understand how when people who work minimum wage jobs make more money, how it stimulates the economy.
No question about it. That's the other side of it, which is if you give someone who makes $80 an hour a raise to $100 an hour, the economic stimulus of what is effectively a 25% increase in their wage is drastically smaller than taking someone who earns $10 an hour and giving them $12.50 an hour, which percentage-wise is the same increase. Very good point by Lewis. You have to talk about the marginal propensity to consume when you talk about the impact of a minimum wage. Just remember some of these points if you can, and remember that when San Francisco did it 2 years ago, we learned it did not destroy the economy.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
There's no doubt that President Barack Obama is now in the, I guess we could call it the sunset phase of his presidency, which has spanned 2 terms, and is sort of an outgoing reminiscence of President Obama's presidency. We're going to be revisiting throughout the next year some classic interviews related to what I like to call, and so do many others, Obama derangement syndrome. Today we go to an interview from February of 2014. I interviewed Avi Lipkin, who had a number of grievances with President Obama, including that President Obama is a Muslim. Now, of course, I always go to, if it were true that President Obama were Muslim, why would that be objectively bad? It's hard to even get to that point with people like Avi Lipkin, but let's review that interview, a real classic. Avi Lipkin, February 2014. I'm joined today by Avi Lipkin. He is an author, lecturer, and journalist. His website is vicmord.com. That's VICMORD.com. It's great to have you here, Mr. Lipkin. You know, at one point you were big on talking about the Barack Obama birth certificate. Now you've moved away from that topic a little bit. So let me open up the floor to you to give us an assessment of President Obama 5 years in. Is he doing a good job? Is he doing a poor job, and why?
Okay, well, there are 2 ways to look at President Obama. There are those people who say, as President Bill Clinton used to say, hey, it's the economy, stupid. If it's, hey, the economy, stupid, Barack Obama, in my opinion, is doing pretty much a good job. And I think that there's a very solid reason for it, which I can get into in a moment. I am a Jewish person who, of course, I live half the year in America, half the year in Israel. And I'm working to warn not only the United States, but Canada, Europe, Russia. I've been on Radio Moscow in Russian to warn the world of the threat of Islam. So the question then is asked, is President Obama a Muslim? The birth certificate issue, I think, is a moot point. But the question as to what is his religious affiliation, this is an important question. Also, if the Arab Spring, so-called, brings about the collapse of Middle Eastern economies, then the people who live there will be fleeing, and they will come to America. And my wife, Rachel, who is also Jewish, but born in Egypt, Sephardic Jewish, She is an intelligence gatherer. She is a radio monitor for the Israeli Kol Israel radio services, and she picks up broadcasts all the time in Arabic from the Middle East, from various sources, that President Obama is a Muslim. He is serving the Islamic cause. And if Saudi Arabia says that America is going to be Muslim in 150 years, that they said 30 years ago, and now they say America will be Muslim in 30 years,
Yeah.
it means we see a tremendous influx of Islamic immigration from the Arab Spring countries, and the Saudis will be paying for a building boom, which will make the American economy boom like never before.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. There's so much in there, Avi, and I want to just, if we can, take it piece by piece. I'm breathless because there was so much in there. So let's go through it step by step. I know from your writing that you are very concerned about the threat from Islam, and you find many Muslims to be untrustworthy, dangerous, etc. I'm curious then why you would trust those same Muslims if it is true that they are saying President Obama is Muslim. Isn't it a little bit it's hypocritical to, on the one hand, not trust Muslims and find them to be incredibly dangerous, but at the same time take their word that President Obama is a Muslim? Isn't that an incredible hypocrisy?
No, not at all. You have to understand, in Islam, it is permissible to make agreements with the infidel, which is the Jew, the Christian, the Hindu, the Buddhist, or the blacks in Africa. The agreements are made and they're kept so long as it is in the interest of the Islamic side to keep it. The moment that the Muslim side feels strong enough and ready to break the agreement, that's when you cannot trust them.
Right, but hold on a second. But the thing is, that doesn't really address how you're very much cherry picking what you believe Muslims about and what you don't. It seems you're choosing to believe Muslims that President Obama is a Muslim because that is a preconceived notion you already have about him, isn't it?
Oh, no. Okay, now I understand. You put it in the right perspective. You see, the Islamic world has what you call PR in English. They come out with something that is nice to the ears of the Westerner. Yeah. In Arabic, they say other things. My wife listens and has been listening for the last 30 years to what they say in Arabic, and it's very different. And what they say in Arabic is what they really mean. And there is a YouTube that I did not even make. It's called Saudi Plant, Plant. And it's about me and my wife, over 5 million hits. And it talks about Obama swearing to the Egyptian foreign minister, Abu Ghait, this is from Egyptian TV, that he is a Muslim. His father was a Muslim, if you're talking about the birth certificate.
But hold on a second, Avi. I want to this is the key thing. We don't have video or audio of President Obama doing that. So what you're saying is that you trust the Muslim media that you are typically not trustworthy of with regard to their claim that President Obama has done this, but you have no evidence that he actually did that.
We had no evidence about 9/11 before it happened, but they said they were going to do it, and they did it.
But the difference is you're saying President Obama has already done this, whereas 9/11 had not yet happened. So I don't see how that's a relevant comparison.
No. Don't misunderstand me, please.
I don't want to.
No, you're a good interviewer. 1997, I came out with my first book called This Fanatic Islam, a Global Threat. And this was during the Bush years. And my wife was picking up broadcasts that they're going to take the planes and crash them into the World Trade Center. And I was flying El Al to the States with very good security, but at the American airports, there's no security. And I said, these people are going to crash their planes into the World Trade Center. And the people at the airports here, LaGuardia, Kennedy, others in Texas, they wouldn't dare to attack us. And then it happened. So after it happened, of course, I was a prophet. And I said, I'm not a prophet. I just listen to my wife. She listens to them. But the point I'm saying is the primary thrust of my message is what my wife picks up in Arabic broadcasts about what they really mean and what they really intend to do, which is what they say in Arabic. Same applies for the Palestinians.
Okay, all right. But so fair. I think that's good, at least. So we, even if we disagree with where you've gotten your information, at least we understand where that is. Now, let me posit a different question to you. Sure. Let's say it's true that President Obama is a Muslim, which of course I don't believe he is. He is. We have no evidence that he is factually, other than Muslim TV that you normally distrust telling us that he is. So let me ask this question. What has he actually done as president that would be concerning in terms of, I don't know,
giving power to Muslims or putting non-Muslim Americans in a worse position. In other words, if President Obama really is a Muslim, it seems he hasn't really helped Muslims very much, has he?
Well, I would say he has, and let me explain it. You asked me, I know I will answer you.
Yeah.
I think that it is undeniable that he has packed the White House staff with Muslim advisors.
Like who?
Well, there's a whole list of 5, 6, 7, 8 names of people who are now senior people in the White House and in the defense that he has put in. I travel all around this country. I just fly into New York for a few days, and then I'm in Texas and all over the place. I speak to a lot of military people, and there are a lot of Muslims now joining the U.S. military, and there is a very serious question of dual loyalty, because they say they will not attack a Muslim target. I received this from many military people all around the country, and I'm telling you, I drive along the Mexican border and the Canadian border in Texas and Florida and other places, and I'm receiving very strong accounts of the Islamization of America.
The problem I have with that logic, Avi, is this, and I think this will resonate with you. I'm also Jewish, although a very secular Jew.
Right.
When individuals say to me, you know, David, because you're Jewish, even though I'm not Israeli, I'm actually from Argentina, because you're Jewish, we question your loyalty to the United States because of the mere fact that you are Jewish. And I find that to be both wrong and anti-Semitic. Along the same lines, if you question American Muslim loyalty to the U.S. merely because they are Muslim, it is equally unfair and disparaging, is it not?
By Western thinking, yes. But again, you have to remember, you have to ask one or two hypothetical questions. Is Islam's plan the conquest of the world? In my opinion, the answer is yes. They say so in Arabic. If they want to conquer the world, the kingpin is the United States of America. They don't really care very much about Israel. Israel is the little Satan for them. America, Christian America, is the great Satan. And again, I'm Jewish also from Argentina, by the way. And we could do the interview in Argentine Spanish if you want. But the point I'm saying is that Islam has a plan. America is the target number one. Stephen Emerson said this in the Jihad in America PBS video he made in 1993. The ultimate target is America. And so this is a steady plan. And it didn't start with Obama. It started with Bush the father, and it continued with Clinton, and then Bush the son. Everyone is subservient to the Saudis because the Saudis, you're in the financial district, the Saudis basically bankroll the American economy. My wife picked up a broadcast where the Saudis were saying, if America doesn't do what we tell them, we're going to pull the plug. But if America is our ally and they do what we tell them to do, then we will raise Wall Street up, which is one of the first things Obama did good, actually. In other words, when Obama came in, it was 6,000. Wall Street was 6,000. Within a year, it was 12,000. Now it's already to 16. And I believe Wall Street will be up very soon to 20,000 because of the massive immigration of Muslims to the country and the funding of building of new houses, a building boom by the Saudis. So like I said earlier in this show, if we're talking about financial and economics, Islam is good for America. But if we're talking about the de-Christianization of the country, which I believe is a Jew, it is Christianity which made America the greatest country on earth.
Yeah, we're just not going to agree on that. I think, though, I wish we had more time. It's fascinating how two Argentinian Jews could end up so far apart on thinking just about everything. But it's an interesting conversation. We've been speaking with Avi Lipkin. His website is vicmord.com. Thanks for being on. I think it's an interesting conversation, although we really didn't agree on much, but that's okay.
I think in the future you will see we agree on a lot of things.
We'll see.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's that time of the week, time to answer questions from the audience. We answer 3 questions at the end of the Friday show. Always, Louis, one of the most popular segments on YouTube. First question today is from Carson. Carson says, should children have legal obligations to parents after reaching adulthood in the way that parents have legal obligations to children before they are adults? My reaction to this is sort of two-sided. On the one hand, my empathetic side says, yeah, I mean, maybe not by law, but parents raise their children when they can't care for themselves, Why shouldn't children have a responsibility to parents when the parents are entering a phase when they can't care for themselves? A few problems with this, though. Number one is the issue of the legal structure and sort of consent. The reason parents have legal obligations to children, in part, is that as a society, we've determined that before a certain age, right, children cannot yet have informed consent over their many elements of their lives. So this changes whether we're talking about a 2-month-old or a 2-year-old or a 12-year-old or someone who's 17 years and 11 months old, right? That it varies over time. But there's sort of a legal reason where we've said below a certain age, you're not yet at a place emotionally and in terms of your development where you can make certain decisions for yourselves. What are we saying if we say there are legal obligations to children for their parents? Are we saying that when you get beyond a certain age, you also enter a period of life where you are not able to make certain decisions for yourself? Certainly adults with certain conditions as they become older might be in those situations, but to say that we should pass a law that applies to everybody, that would certainly be problematic, Lewis. And the other problem that I see here is, and this is a very, I don't want to say it's a utilitarian argument, but parents generally choose to have children. Now, even when you could say, well, there could be unintended pregnancies. Okay, yes, I guess, but presumably you should still have access to abortion. And you may say, well, not everybody would. Fine, there are exceptions to this. But generally speaking, the act of having children, and you could choose to adopt out as well. You would, if you don't, then you're choosing to raise that child. You're choosing in a way to take this responsibility over the child. As a child, you're not really choosing to be born, right? Now, that's an argument that can be misused in many ways. And
you're not choosing to have parents.
You're not choosing to have parents. Yeah. I don't know how strong of an argument that is, but these are some of the ideas that came to mind when I was thinking about this question.
Yeah. But, parents do, in a way, have the ability to opt out, even after the child is born, because until that child reaches that age of consent,
right,
the parents can give that child up for adoption.
They can.
And, in a way, when you bring your mother or father, grandmother, grandfather to a home or a place that they're cared for, in a way, it's kind of like them being in foster care almost.
To a certain extent, it is, yeah. And I think the important thing is the question says, should there be a legal obligation? Right. My sort of moral and ethical feelings and my feelings based on empathy are one set of feelings, as I've said. Legally, though, I think it would be incredibly problematic to say until the child is 18, the parents have legal responsibilities. And once the parent is older than X, the child has legal responsibilities. I see any number of compelling reasons to oppose that.
Yes, I think legally we should not implement any laws like this. Was it China that we talked about? It was a long time ago. It was either China or Japan, where there was a law that basically said children have to go visit their elderly parents a certain number of times.
I thought it was Japan.
Maybe Japan, yeah. Really interesting story if you want to look that up and revisit it, because it kind of gets into this whole thing.
Send me your thoughts on this one. Interesting question. A lot of angles to approach it from. Victoria wrote in. Victoria said, should organ donations be restricted only to other organ donors? In other words, if you want to be the recipient of an organ donation, should you be mandated to also be an organ donor? This is mostly sort of an ethical question, right, Lewis? I mean, legally, you could pass a law which says organ donations are for people who are organ donors. There would be all sorts of hurdles to go through, but we sort of understand the logistics of it. What do you think, though, Lewis, about the morals and ethics of that?
Well, to start with, there are people who are not able to be organ donors because of conditions they might have, because of a virus they might have, because of any number of medical reasons why someone may not be eligible to be a donor.
Okay, exempt them. Let's make it easy. Assuming you are not exempt from being able to donate organs, should you have to be an organ donor in order to receive an organ donation?
No, I don't think so, because I think that some people, maybe for religious reasons, maybe for...
So you have an exemption for religious reasons, merely for stating you have a religious objection to donating organs, you should be exempt.
Exempt from receiving? No,
exempt from having to donate in order to receive.
I don't know. It's ultimately, even though I don't believe there's an afterlife, or when you're gone, you're gone.
Okay.
Still, as far as the family goes and the individual, they might just kind of want to keep things intact. They might want to go through the process that we're used to when you die. And so I don't think that should disqualify you for something that may extend your life or save your life if at a very young age. You might even be so young that it's not even, you're not even eligible to be a donor yet, or it hasn't even come up.
Well, your parents can decide.
Or something like that. Yeah, but what if they don't? Then it's your parents deciding for you that you would be ineligible to receive as well as to give.
I mean, one of the arguments you're making is if the family would just rather the deceased's body remain intact, that we should sort of say, okay, that's sort of top priority, and that should be allowed, and they should still be eligible for receiving organ donations. If as a society we determine that we would be far better off if everybody were organ donors, or that we instituted this policy because it would increase organ donations, couldn't you make the argument that that sort of is an overarching good over a family's desire merely because of tradition that the deceased's body be kept intact? Like, couldn't we make that determination as a society? Hey, we don't not care about people who want the body to be intact, but society would benefit to this degree, this huge degree, if we were to put this policy.
But would you really legislate that? Because what if the individual wishes to remain intact, after they pass? Then, would you legislate and force people to be organ donors regardless? I don't think we should get into that territory. I don't work in the medical field. I don't know if the system we have now is good enough. I don't know if we have enough organ donors. It seems like we probably don't.
Right.
But I'm just not willing to make those big changes yet.
Let's continue the discussion about that one. I know it will come up again. Last question today. Abigail wrote in. Abigail says, should sex education classes include discussions of more common sexual fetishes with the aim of normalizing them and reducing stigma? I mean, the question already assumes that any sexual fetish should be considered normal, right? It should be normalized, and that stigma should be reduced around it. I don't know that everybody agrees that's the case, Lewis. I mean, there are some pretty unusual fetishes out there that I think societal consensus would be, no, we shouldn't think of that as normal.
Well, I think you can also bring this into the pedophilia. The pedophilia discussion could kind of play into this a little bit, because you have what would be considered against the norm / an illness. How do you, So do I think it's crazy to tell kids in sex ed class that, listen, there are some people out there who are attracted to inanimate objects? I don't see any harm in telling them that. It exists. It happens. And might it help, in the future, if they meet someone like this, or if they hear about someone like this, perhaps if they are aware of it and learn that it's just a state of mind, or a condition, a mental condition, if you will, they might not, persecute that person for it, or I don't know. Is it a good thing overall?
I mean, the question I ask is, what's the public benefit if in sex ed classes we say, hey, we're going to normalize the fact that some people like to have sex with trains, right? We're going to normalize that to reduce the stigma associated with having sex with a train, right? Whatever the mechanics of that are, I still don't understand. Or we're going to teach people that, hey, some people, in order to be sexually fulfilled, before they engage in sexual intercourse, they've got to build a deck outside their house or something, right? Whatever it is, how do we come up with the list of, like, here's the fetishes that we're going to normalize and destigmatize? I just don't really understand the logic of it. Do we issue a blanket statement saying, hey, anything that someone derives sexual pleasure from, there should be no stigma attached to it, and it should be considered completely normal?
Well, maybe
that seems off.
Maybe the goal isn't to eliminate the stigma, or to normalize it, or make it seem acceptable. Maybe you do just issue a blanket statement and you say, listen, this is how things normally work. And there is a range of people with, a range of sexual preferences. And some people like feet, and some people like cars, and some people like, sofas. I mean, you can issue that statement without trying to destigmatize or normalize any of it.
But you know what the obvious problem with that is? It's the thing you said at first. Here's the way things normally work. What is included in the way things normally work? There was a time when homosexuality was considered mental illness. There are still people who would say, oh no, in sex ed, you teach that gayness is not natural, rather than saying it is natural. So how would you ever get consensus about what it is that we're supposed to teach as here's sort of like normal sex ed, okay, about how things work, as Lewis says. And then here's the stuff that a little weirder, but you should still be aware of it. I don't understand how you could realistically draw that line in any sensible way without putting at huge risk, just offending or discriminating, you know? At the same time, I think the concern is you say anything is normal. Having sex with pieces of wood is normal. Being aroused by fluorescent bulbs is normal, right? I mean, I don't see how you could do anything about this other than to just say, here is what sexual fetishes, here's a definition of sexual fetishes. These can take any number of forms. Be aware of it, kids. Good luck.
I think that's where, maybe that's it. Maybe that's where we leave it. Yeah.
I don't know. Send me your thoughts on that. What should be done with regard to sexual fetishes in sex education classes? We have such a great bonus show for you today. Sadly, I'm out of time. I can't tell you what is on the bonus show, but if you're a member, sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You'll find out soon enough.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.